but time seems to be an important aspect of this work that allows for the poem to be written. And I'm curious how duration functions in your poetry, which you've spoken just a little bit about in terms of the river, but I'm going to open this up and you can talk about it in multiple ways, but I'm curious about the level of the line, but also in the accretion of the personal and the everyday. And specifically in Spool 25. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind reading that poem and
Sure.
then talking a little bit about that.
There are just 4 poems in that section, but I'm happy to read all 4 if
Yeah,
you'd like.
that would be great.
Okay. Spool 25. My faith is stored in the wild domesticity of sunflowers, aphids, wives, how they reach and attend faith by being itself an action moving to the sun, its bright target to point alive, the ravined leaf by the ravening eye, my green sunbeam swan I'm beginning to see and continuing to see. To be concerned for things rare and daily means to care for them, a privacy of surfaces, faces, this body mark of daily feed, a letter there, a G-tube. These are worries not mapped out. A concrete figure materializes in din, a hole in the body, her body a hole. Oh, fear cherish a night swing, fit oneself to oneself, a reifying glove-like action, like anxiety too, to be concerned for things rare, relays of force, needle and needle, her speech, mine. She does not speak, she does not even eat. Days are clear, but nights are dark, dark night of the soul when daughter thumps and thrashes. I gnash too, her future full of not here so, a silence dozing, linguistic film. So thoughts bloom in a second sight, my limited time or timeless disposition. Psyche drain me, apostrophize all shadow. I know not where she goes, or how to go to her, with articulate grace, her darkness visible, so I see, can name it, patience, please, please, dark, dark understanding. And soul clap hands and sing, and louder sing, this vowel lust, spool it off. Time is domestic, its velocity quarks a total cosmic. Centrifugal, my little girl's girl, her wavering eyes and watery calm, this soul-side climax wants to clap, she and me a raveling spore, in every darkness a visible calm, our rhizome ring in the dust.
Thank you. It's interesting too to see some of the changes between the one here
Yeah.
and there. This is a later
This is
revision.
the final version, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in the project Spool, and the length of the lines, and how that fits into the project, or this idea of like this time-based project. And also the personal. I know you and your family enough to like see the personal in this, but how you see that working and shaping, how you see that shaping your poetry.
Well, Spool started out as a very specific kind of durational project that was going to be to write a year in 3s. And the 3s came up really practically out of, I started writing these poems on Abby's and I honeymoon, and I was late in my journal and I was running out of space, and so I started just doing these sort of notational 3-word line poems, and I could get like 5 or 6 of them on a page. So it was really a practical matter that started the mode. And then
Not
I thought,
having enough space.
and none of it was very, it's like just how can I adapt? And so I just started writing these, and then I got this idea to write a year in 3s, and so it was going to be a kind of love poem to Abby and a kind of paean to new marriage. But then life took over, and as you know, our family situation is a little complicated with my daughter Maya's autism. And so this plan to write this year in 3s, which was a kind of, lyric burst kind of idea, that year was a particularly difficult year of recognizing that there were some developmental delays and that she wasn't sleeping, she wasn't eating, and that just sort of, to continue the metaphor, unraveled my plan. And so this thing that was going to be a year long took nearly a decade. And the impulse to write these, really immediate types of poems became actually a kind of defense and survival tool that I didn't have time to write. And so my relationship to time collapsed in the writing of this book. The two books previous to this are like sort of massive maximalist attention, research-driven, data mining projects, and this was very intentionally a kind of relief from that for myself and to try to write a lyric again. But that lyric changed dramatically through these difficulties, and as time unraveled, these little three-word line poems became in their procedure a kind of thing to push against. And so I knew basically what to do, and I would have really furtive kind of writing practice where you see at the doctor's office and have a little scrap of paper and I just would start writing them down, or I'd be stuck in traffic or something and I just write these little things down, and those would be seeds that would then sort of expand as I had a little more attention. But I didn't have to sort of have this massive plan, I just had a mode, and the mode really became a kind of survival mechanism, and I really wrote them all through the most difficult years, and I didn't worry about what was going to happen to it or if I had a project that would emerge out of it. I just sort of trusted the mode. And that's, I think, one of the things that I really learned from writing this book, that you are not necessarily in control over those formal dimensions. You can set parameters, and I initially had set this sort of like, okay, if there are going to be these three-word poems, three-word lines, and that procedure of counted verse was going to, produce this poem, which was very much kind of in the spirit of A.R. Ammons's Tape for the Turn of the Year. And I love that poem, I love Ammons, and I thought, here's my sort of corollary to that. But life happens, and so life unraveled that idea, and then it became this thing that went on and on and on. And it, frankly, the mode continued. I would literally see the world in threes, hear the world in threes, pick things out of context that clustered around threes, or reading pages, I would start seeing things in threes. It was this sort of obsessive defense that I needed, and it really lasted all the way up until we went on sabbatical. And that was a point when Maya was very sick, and we didn't really know if she would survive, but we took a leap of faith and said, we're going to go down to Costa Rica and, sink or swim. And lo and behold, she swam, and she got much healthier and stronger, and my relationship to my writing practice radically changed with this like opening up of time, and the mode just stopped. I stopped hearing the world in threes, and so it was a real lesson in sort of like trusting your own process, and that fairly often you turn out to be a different writer than the one you set out to be or that you hope to be, and to just learn to sort of pay attention to your own process was inspiring, to sort of say, well, I don't need to have this figured out. Something's happening, and that's sufficient. And then after that period when it ended, I came back from sabbatical, and suddenly this thing was, I wasn't hearing things in the same way. And then I had all these pages. I had, 200 pages of these things. And then it was a question of, well, what to do with these? And that began another kind of mode of attention, to kind of look at them and see that they didn't necessarily, they weren't interesting necessarily from a beginning to end, kind of like this is spool 1, this is spool 2, this is spool 3, that there were better and worse spools. Some of them were terrible, or they didn't fit, and that a thematic kind of began to emerge that enabled me to sort of structure the book. And that brought in other things. I mean, that brought in, the Richard Serra, which...
I've been there and been inside that.
Mm-hmm. And that whole sense of sort of, massive bulwark brooding, heavy thing juxtaposed to the delicacy and sort of like, those things aren't held down, they're leaning against each other. And so that became a kind of metaphor for a moat or a wall that would protect the family, and a structural metaphor that kind of enabled the sort of thinking of this as a thread or a spool or a ribbon, something that ties us together, something that holds us back, something that protects us. And so the sort of gesture discovered other things along the way that were sort of deeply satisfied and seemed to make sense in this intensely domestic book that at the same time is, as I say, time is domestic, but its velocity is quite cosmic. This idea that this little observance here is connected to everything else. And I think some of the poems try to trace out that sort of, here and now juxtaposed to that much more sort of geologic or cosmic sense of time and space. And I think that all just sort of pointed to how durational projects can be really, really powerful, and they give you something to do. I mean, that was the nice thing, is I sort of like, well, I know what I'm sort of supposed to do every day, and if I get one of these down, then that was a good day. And that was enough, and I worried about all the rest of the stuff. I frankly didn't know if the family would survive. So this idea of like having some highly elaborate project that I, needed to fulfill was just totally fell away as a kind of idea of writing.